Did you know that you can go solar without any installations? And even if you're just renting, there are no upfront costs, no panels, and no termination fees. All you have to do is connect to a local solar farm through Cascadia Community Energy and discover how you can make an impact and start saving on your next power bill. Find out more at CascadiaCommunityEnergy.com. That's CascadiaCommunityEnergy.com. Do you have a small business that's ready for the next step, or maybe some back burner office projects you wanted to tackle this year? Spitzer Tech is a local company offering small business and nonprofits knowledgeable and friendly IT support. So when you call, you'll get a real person on the phone. No AI chatbots, no long hold times, just good service from competent folks who want to help you get back to work. They're ready to solve your problems at spitzertech.net. That's SPITZER tech.net. This is CityCast Portland. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Today on CityCast Portland, could a new city program keep legacy businesses from closing? Why a controversial homeless service provider contracted by both the county and city is shutting down? And traffic deaths are falling, except for one key demographic. Joining me are KBOO News Director Althea Billings and our very own newsletter editor, Rachel Monahan. Thanks for hanging out with me, you guys.
Good to be here.
Hey.
Hello. As most of our listeners know, before we jump into the news, I usually ask an opening question to get us started. And today's opening question is inspired by a very interesting and limited time feast a local Vietnamese restaurant is offering. For the entire month of April, Central East Side's Paper Bridge is serving a 10-dish iguana feast. It serves 2 to 4 people. It's going to cost you $160, and only one special per night will be available. It includes things like iguana cracklins, salt-fried iguana leg, iguana curry, and congee, among other delicacies. Ironically, I was Googling because I was like, is this like a Vietnamese thing? I had no idea. Iguana is not native to Vietnam, but iguana curry is a traditional dish in coastal Vietnam. So they just sort of, I think it's an invasive species, and they're just like, let's eat it. So my question to you both is, what is the wildest thing you've ever eaten that was outside of your usual, palate and eating habits?
Well, all of my wild eating comes from one summer where I was teaching English in South Korea.
Oh, wow.
And I had silkworm. That wasn't so bad. The kind of weirdest experience was eating sushi, but the sushi came to the table on the fish with the head still on. And there were 2 fish, and one was still breathing.
No.
Yes, I didn't touch that fish, actually. That's my wild eating. But no iguana feast for me this month. Thank you very much.
Would you, though, if you were offered?
If someone else were paying for my iguana feast? Is that the question? Mm-hmm. I don't think so. I think I would just go noodles there.
You're like, can I have a pad thai? Thank you.
Yes. Pad thai, please. I don't know that they actually serve pad thai there. They must.
No, I don't think I think they're too cool.
This is a tough question because perhaps I've either repressed the memories or I'm not getting weird enough at all. But I've definitely been given some fruits that they're like, there's no name for this. Just eat it. Mm-hmm. And you kind of go with it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a great answer. But in terms of the iguana feast, I think I could do one iguana dish. Again, if somebody else was like paying, I would want to taste it. But 10 is a lot. I
do want to let our listeners know that Althea is born and raised Northwest. So the wild thing she's eaten is something out of season. But I tried toasted grasshoppers in Mexico. They're called chapulines, and I wasn't a big fan. Maybe I had some bad ones, but they were dry and gritty. Guys, I could occasionally make out the texture of their legs in my mouth, and I just could not hang. So I might try it one more time. If they're fresh, I don't know what that means, but I'm leaning towards never again.
Fair.
Yeah, that's when I was like, oh, I'm American. Oh, yeah. Thanks for your answers, you guys. On to the news of the week. Althea, what's the city plan to save legacy businesses? Also, what is a legacy business?
I'd be glad to tell you. And it is something that they're newly defining. So we're talking about an article from Coin that's talking about a study commissioned at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability back in February, talking about how the city might better support legacy businesses. And so legacy businesses, how they're, trying to define it now, is an independently operated business in Portland that has been around for more than 20 years and has contributed to the city's history and identity. And part of the reason that this study came into being was because we've seen so many of these types of businesses close, especially in the wake of the COVID pandemic. I mean, plenty of them closed in the direct wake of it, but even in the years since, we're still seeing major closures of places like Sheridan Fruit Company, Andy and Bax, the Roxy, Bridges, Crush. There's a whole list of them in this study. Mm-hmm. And so this effort by the city was trying to figure out what is the impact of these closures and what could the city do to try to fix it. And there are small business efforts and things like that at the city, but none of them are really dedicated to businesses like this that have been around a long time and that have a big sort of cultural, social impact and part of the identity of Portland and who we are.
Yeah. So what is the plan exactly? Like, I don't quite understand. It seems like there's concepts of a plan.
Exactly. There's concepts of a plan. There's sort of a recommendation for a framework here. So they compared a bunch of other cities. There's like 24 cities across the U.S. that have something like this, some way to support legacy businesses. And in this study, they did a bunch of interviews and did some policy research as well. This is Eco Northwest that did this on behalf of the city. But basically, what they found is that what is challenging these businesses the most is rising commercial rents, increased operating costs. That's stuff like deferred maintenance. They operate oftentimes on very thin margins. Sometimes it's difficult to have succession planning. The initial operators may have reached retirement age and want to be able to pass the business on, but it can be really difficult to do. There's also, inequities with access to capital for some of these things that these businesses need. And so the city program that they're sort of proposing of what the city could provide is promotional opportunities and support that way, maybe contracted professional services through the city, dedicated staff support. Financial assistance was like what they heard most from business owners is like, hey, we could use a little influx of cash for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, my editorializing as well is like, it almost feels so shocking when a legacy business is like, hey, we gotta go. And it's like, not like we're about to, but it's like, it's over next
week. Like right
now.
Yeah, yeah.
Like right now we're done. And it's really shocking, I think, partly because they're part of the legacy, right? And these small businesses, it sort of seems like you must have hacked it if you've been able to stick it out this long. But there's a lot of types of factors, of businesses that have been in the same spot and occupying that same role. They play a really important role in the community that is important for Portland to keep around, but they don't have dedicated support. And maybe they should.
I guess I have a question. Like, another way they talk about these businesses is legacy. When I hear that, I have questions about whether the city should be investing in supporting businesses that have been around this long, because I am imagining that there was a certain privilege associated with, these businesses. I guess I'm wondering if they're whiter, if they're run by more men than other small businesses in the city. So I'm curious about that.
That's a really interesting point. I also am wondering how sustainable it is to keep pumping money into failing businesses. And I get you don't want the character of a neighborhood to leave, but to me, I'm wondering if it's the city's job to, again, fund businesses rather than, it seems like maybe the rent's too high. And what if we took care of that? Because the rent's too goddamn high everywhere. It's not just these businesses. This is just, a harbinger of where we are all at financially.
One thing I will say that was in some way addressed in this study, and what they found is that data-wise, there is a disproportionate amount of these legacy businesses that are being impacted by gentrification. So it's clustered in spaces where there's rapidly changing socioeconomic conditions. And so a lot of these legacy businesses, I can't speak for all of them, there's like 4,500 across the city that they were feeling could fit this definition. And that being part of the character and the longstanding like legacy of neighborhoods that are gentrifying, that does have a disproportionate impact on Portland's like BIPOC communities. And that's something that they acknowledge in the study.
Interesting.
That's really interesting. Well, it doesn't seem like the city really has decided on what they're going to do, except the idea that they might want to do something. It's just interesting for me to hear the city say, hey, let's promise funding that we don't have.
It doesn't have to be funding. I will say this. I'm sorry. I'm playing like defend the study advocate
No,
right
of
now.
course,
Sorry,
of course.
I read it, and they have some different ideas about what it could look like. Obviously, financial assistance is something that the business owners were like, yeah, we should do that. And 84% of community members that they surveyed were also like in support of like that the city should have something to support or to target at legacy businesses. But there's ideas outside of just cash influx. It could just be sort of having more support at the city level, acknowledgement of their role as a legacy business, and helping to navigate the systems that the city has that might be aimed at, newer, smaller businesses.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I can't wait to see how that unfolds. Let's take a quick break here, and when we come back, a little gossip, a little nonprofit gossip, and also, news of consequence, of course.
Get you a podcast that can do both.
So when was the last time you got out of the city for a weekend? And I don't mean just a day trip. If it's been a minute, I might have something for you. Cascadia Getaways is a local Oregon company like actual Oregonians managing vacation homes across the coast, Mount Hood, and the Willamette Valley. They're not some out-of-state tech platform. This is a small team that knows every property, knows the local spots, and actually picks up the phone when you call or text. And when you book through their site instead of the big travel apps, you save 15 to 20%. Same homes, same hot tubs, same ocean views. You're just skipping the middleman fees. And that money stays with a local business instead of going to some corporate headquarters in San Francisco or Seattle. So whether you want a cabin with a hot tub near government camp, an oceanfront condo in Seaside, or a wine country house with a view of the valley, check out CascadiaGetaways.com. That's Cascadia Getaways, plural, .com, or text getaway to 971-350-1869. And if you own a vacation rental or know someone who's tired of their manager, reach out. Book a trip or talk shop at CascadiaGetaways.com. If you're looking to explore our beautiful coastline before the crowds hit, Newport, Oregon has some new places to stay that might be of interest to you. The All Red is family and dog friendly, just steps away from the beach. You can enjoy nightly fire pits, the pool, and sauna. They also have an on-site restaurant, making traveling with kids a little easier. Hotel Sylvia offers something quieter with oceanfront views, shelves of books, and a setting that feels like an old eclectic library. You can channel your inner sexy librarian and really settle in. The Louis gives you a more boutique experience by greeting you at the door with lo-fi jazz and a wall full of records waiting to be played. There's also private saunas and hot tubs that invite real rest. It's also only steps away from the historic Nye Beach Arts District, where you can easily grab a nightcap before bed. You can learn more about these lodging options and plan your next getaway at discovernewport.com/citycast. That's discovernewport.com/citycast. So I have some homeless service updates and nonprofit gossip to share, which is honestly the highest tier of not my business, but tell me more. My partner used to work in the nonprofit world, and I really miss that daily tea, I gotta tell you. So anyhow, Sunstone Way, a homeless service nonprofit working with both the county and city, is shutting down because of financial insolvency, brought on by a whistleblower lawsuit that was filed against the company. Also, years of financial mismanagement, which I'll get into. So immediately, what does this mean for our local shelters? Sunstone Way currently operates 6 shelters with about 290 beds. They run 2 motel shelters funded by Multnomah County, 2 sleeping pod shelters, and an overnight-only shelter funded by the city of Portland, and a sleeping pod shelter funded by Clackamas County. Both Multnomah and Clackamas County said they were immediately looking for a new provider for their shelters, so they have no plans in closing. They're just like Sunstone out, somebody else in. The city of Portland has one pod shelter under Sunstone's management that will also seek just another nonprofit to run it, but it is shutting down a pod shelter they were running in the Lloyd district, and the city plans to move some of those 38 pods to just existing shelters or just to keep them on reserve to replace others as they're needed. They're also closing down a 96-bed overnight-only shelter that Sunstone was managing, but according to the head of homeless services for the city, only like an average of 20 people per night were sleeping at that shelter. So they're like, And they do have plans on opening it again next winter, but right now they're just like, there's not a need for it. So the impact of Sunstone Way shutting down will be minimal if both the city and the counties are able to find replacement providers to run their shelters in time. What will affect our homeless services in the long run are the county and city's upcoming steep budget cuts, which could cut close to a third of county shelter beds. So that is more of consequence than this. But here's the dirt on Sunstone Way. First, the whistleblower lawsuit. Sunstone's former finance director, Holly Miller, alleged that their chief executive officer, Andy Goebel, and two other top employees overspent on office spaces. They had like 2 offices that they did not need, staff retreats to Bend, and overpriced contracts with nonprofits that they had personal connections to. Miller also alleges that after she brought these concerns to the organization, leadership retaliated against her and fired her. There's a ton more on those details, and I highly suggest you read Willamette Week Anthony Effinger's series of stories on it, because he's been digging for months and months and months, and now it's like the end of his story is that they're finally shutting down. Also, in 2022, Multnomah County said Sunstone Way overbilled the county by $525,000, like $500,000. And they're currently getting audited again by Multnomah County. So they could be on the hook for more money if they find that they were overbilled, even if they're shut down. So I don't understand how that's going to work, but that's what's happening right now. So what do you guys think?
Woof.
Well, it definitely seems notable that the county was, on them for $500,000 of overspending.
That's a lot of money to overspend.
It's like, and the stakes are so high because I guess there are budget shortfalls across different levels of local government right now, and homelessness is such an important issue for all of us.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see which shelter formats are going to be retained and which ones are like, well, maybe we let that one go. Mm-hmm. I've also been hearing, of course, as we're going into budget season, that city councilors maybe are not as interested in funding the overnight shelters from Keith Wilson's plan last year for a second time, that they're not quite as desirable as, these motel shelters that have seen quite a bit of success, pod shelters, places where people have their own space. There are a decent amount of providers in the space who will, the names that will take up the mantle. But it is it's a contraction, and it's sad, and it's like such a drag to just see the money misspent, I guess, because that $500K is like not for nothing. That could house a lot of people.
Yeah. I do also want to mention that these nonprofits that get in trouble for mismanagement or whatever, it's always top officials. The people who are actually doing the work on the ground are the ones that are getting screwed because they're doing a good job. Like, people were basically talking about Sunstone providers, like the actual providers, and they're just like, they're awesome. They are doing the best they can. They're doing the work. And it's just so sad that it's like management that's screwing everything up. It's not the actual providers working at these shelters. And it's like they're not being honored, or they're not really being respected, and their work is not being valued, because clearly there are people on the top who are just trying to find ways to keep the money for themselves in the craziest nonprofit, which is like homeless services. That to me is like, how evil do you have to be? Or you're just like, yeah, that's where I'll make my extra, retreat to Bend. It's like, come on, man. Come on.
Yeah, it's tough extra, especially when you're, talking about the folks that actually work at these shelters. When you work in a nonprofit, your heart is so tied up in it, mm-hmm. and the integrity of the work that you do is so important. And saying anything publicly to like make possibly the work sound bad is really scary to do.
That's why there's so much gossip in the nonprofit world, is because nobody wants to bring down their organization. because the work is so important, but at the same time, so much mismanagement gets brushed aside because they're just like, move forward. We have a new goal. We have a new funding source and we need to get this done. Whatever. We'll manage up. And it's like, that's unfortunate. But let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, I guess we have some good news, but then some bad news. Rachel will explain. Whether you're already renting your vacation home or considering it for the first time, Casago Central Oregon Coast is ready to help you get the most from your investment. As part of Roofstock, they combine the power of a national platform with a kind of deep local knowledge that only comes from truly being here. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Their team is passionate about creating exceptional guest experiences that showcase everything that makes our coast so special while giving homeowners the trusted hands-on partnership they deserve. Visit vacasa.com/Oregon ad to get started. That's Vacasa, VACASA.com/Oregon ad. All right, Rachel, what is going on? Are we meeting our traffic death goals? Okay, that sounded weird. I'm going to say that again because it sounds like we are hoping for traffic deaths. You know what? Take it away.
Traffic safety.
There we go.
So the number of traffic deaths in Portland is falling. It's coming down after it peaked after the pandemic. That's great news. But the Oregonian's Tatum Todd, a reporter there, looked at the data more closely for traffic deaths in 2025 and found some not great news there. There were 39 traffic deaths, the lowest number since 2018, but a third of the people who died were over the age of 65. That's 13 people in all. And it's the highest number of traffic deaths among that demographic in a decade. That's according to PBOT's data. And that may not sound like a big number, but this is what the Oregonian is reporting. Between 2016 and 2024, the number of senior deaths fluctuated between 4 and 8 per year. So it's a really big jump. It's not clear what it means yet. National data on traffic deaths isn't out yet. State data on traffic deaths isn't out yet for last year. So we don't know if this is part of a broader trend, and we don't know whether this is something that will continue. But the Oregonian put a name and a face to one of the older Portlanders who died last year. This woman they profile, her name was Gray Wolf. She was 87. She's a former restaurateur who once owned the Bread and Ink Cafe in another spot. She was a Reed alum. She had 6 kids and 8 grandkids, and she went back to school and became a therapist and worked full time until the day she died.
Dang.
She took a daily morning walk to Mount Tabor, and it was at before dawn, and it was on one of those walks the day before Thanksgiving that she was killed. In her case, the driver wasn't cited. I guess that means they didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. But yeah.
Man, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I know that the findings are still coming, but why senior citizens? Is it because they're walking more, during dawn and dusk? What is it about that demo?
I don't think we know. It could just be a whole bunch of factors for each of these particular cases that ended in tragedy. If you're in a car as a senior, you're more likely to suffer more serious injuries. We get more fragile sometimes as we get older. So that's something that's true.
Oh, that makes sense. So same amount of people are getting hit, but the senior citizens are the ones that are dying.
That could be the case. I don't think anyone knows why exactly. I did want to mention a little bit what's been happening with traffic deaths in our city. They're coming down since the pandemic. There were 57 deaths in 2024, 39 this last year. I actually thought that hot take, there was a mental health crisis that accompanied our public health crisis, but actually deaths started going up before the pandemic in 2019, and they continue to rise.
That's interesting.
During the pandemic, and that's roughly true with what's happened nationally.
Any next steps for them that they're looking into or thinking about?
I don't know that there is a next step. I think they're going to keep an eye on this. One thing I read when I was reading about traffic deaths this morning is that there is a reason to narrow in on particular populations to try and figure out if there's anything to do. And one example I ran across was that female drivers are 73% more likely than male drivers to be severely injured in vehicle crashes.
Weird.
And what they've done there is that data point was available in the New York Times because there are now female crash dummies. So I'm not sure what they're going to do for senior citizens to try and figure out how to address their particular needs. But that is what people who work on traffic safety look at. They try and figure out what is important for particular demographics.
Althea, what's your theory?
Well, I was curious if Rachel could explain a little bit more about the meaning of the female crash test dummy.
Okay.
Oh, well, just the idea is that they're trying to design cars for women to be safe in, not just men.
Imagine
Did
that.
they know I was driving this whole time? Oh, God.
I didn't.
Well, they
That's
wouldn't
tough.
necessarily have known it was safer for men than women if they hadn't looked at this data. And similarly, it's important that the Oregonian put this out into the world.
I mean, I'm very heartened to see that the numbers have dropped at all. It really, the past few years has seemed like a runaway train, that Vision Zero and the plans that the city has had to try to cut traffic deaths entirely have been remarkably unsuccessful. I don't know if I'm ready to celebrate it yet, especially thinking back to, I want to say it was around the time that Gray Wolf was killed. There were 3 people killed in East Portland as pedestrians over a weekend. It was really a really staggering thing that had happened. And one other thing that really stuck out to me in this article was, I believe it was Gray's daughter, I want to say, talking about this, and that people maybe have a tendency when older adults are killed in an accident like this, that it's oh, well, they had a good long life, acting like it's okay.
Yeah.
And that it's well, she had a great life. So, washing your hands a little bit of some of the consequence of losing a life in this way. And so I thought that was really an interesting thing to bring up, and I think important to fold into the rhetoric and how these accidents are considered, because it does matter, and it isn't no big deal just based on somebody's age.
Yeah, the PBOT spokesman was quoted saying something that I think they often say, and that is very true, which is one traffic death is one too many. But it's not clear that the city is yet operating that way, or we as drivers and pedestrians are operating that way. So, yeah.
Yeah. I just want to remind people that, especially when you're walking in the evening or early morning, reflective clothing is really important. In the winter, I get hit almost every day walking to the gym, and it's because I'm in dark clothing. There's cars parked to the very tippity top. No one can see you coming, so I always have my phone as a flashlight, and I kind of flash it as I'm walking. But that's a lot of please don't hit me. Supposedly, PBOT has made that illegal, but there are no yellow lines. So people are continuing. There's still F-150s parked to almost the very beginning of, a crosswalk.
In the next road.
Yeah, exactly. So until that's sorted out, I think we're going to have to play a defensive game if you're walking, which is unfortunate. But yeah, thanks for that breakdown, Rachel. Oh, man. I was really hoping yours was going to be a good news, but it's it's not good news.
There's some good news in it, but yeah, there's some tragedy there too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me, y'all. That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, share it with a friend, rate or leave us a good review. You can also support this show and get great perks like ad-free listening by becoming a CityCast Portland neighbor. Just visit membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.